Sleet was falling on the state capitol at 7:40 in the morning, the kind of grey February sleet that ticks against a windshield, like somebody tapping a fingernail on glass. The plaza was empty. It was a Saturday. The flags on the dome hung heavy and wet, and the only vehicle on the whole east lot was a 1989 Ford F-150, faded blue, one headlight ring rusted through, idling rough in a reserved space near the side entrance. The man behind the wheel was 56 years old, wearing a brown Carhartt jacket with a torn elbow and jeans flecked with white primer paint. He sat for a minute before cutting the engine, the way a man does when a truck still smells like somebody who's gone. This one smelled like WD-40 and peppermint candies, because his father had kept a bag of them in the door pocket for 30 years, and 3 weeks after the funeral, the bag was still there. On the dashboard, curling a little from the defroster heat, sat a folded funeral program with a photograph of an old man in a deacon's suit. The driver's name was Alton Reese. He came here most Saturdays, early, before anyone else, carried a cardboard box or two inside, and left before 9. He liked the quiet. He liked that on Saturdays, nobody wanted anything from him. He killed the engine, pocketed a peppermint out of habit, and reached for the box on the passenger seat. It held his father's Bible, a level, and a coffee can full of loose drill bits. He did not see the patrol cruiser that had rolled to a stop at the mouth of the lot, lights off, wipers going. He did not see the officer inside lift a radio, look at the truck, look at him, and put the radio back down without calling anything in. He would remember that detail later. The officer never ran the plate. He never wanted to know. He had already decided. The cruiser door opened, and Officer Derek Sloan stepped out into the sleet. Sloan was 39, built like a man who lifted weights angry, with a jaw he worked arched aside when he talked. 11 years with the Capital District Police. He crossed the lot with his hand resting on his belt, and he was already shaking his head before he said a word. "Whoa, whoa, whoa! The hell do you think you're doing?" Alton set the box on the tailgate and turned around slowly, hands loose and visible, the way his father had taught him in a kitchen in 1982, a lesson delivered in a low voice with the radio turned down. "Morning, officer. Just carrying some things inside." "Inside?" Sloan looked at the truck, then at the building, then back, like he was doing a math problem with an answer he didn't like. "Inside the Capitol." "Oh, yes, sir. This lot is reserved. Permitted vehicles only. You see that sign?" He jabbed a finger at the small white sign at the head of the space. "You blind, or you just figure signs don't apply to you?" "I'm parked where I always park," Alton said. Calm, even. "I've got a building access card in my wallet. I'm happy to show you if you'll let me reach for it." "Nobody's reaching for anything." Sloan stepped closer. Sleet was collecting on his shoulders like dandruff. He looked at the torn jacket, the paint-stained jeans, the rusted headlight ring. His eyes did the whole arithmetic in about 2 seconds. "Let me guess. Maintenance? Contractor? Because I know every crew that works this building, and I don't know you." "I'm not maintenance." "Then you got no business here." Sloan's voice dropped into something almost bored, which was somehow worse than shouting. "Look, I don't know if you're sleeping in that thing or scrapping copper out of it, but you picked the wrong parking lot, my man. Officer, if you run the plate or look at my card, this gets cleared up in about 30 seconds. Anybody can print a card." Sloan smiled with the bottom half of his face. "You know how many of you people come through downtown with a lanyard and a story? The Capitol's for taxpayers, Chief, not for whatever this is." He flicked 2 fingers at Alton, head to boots, the whole of him, like brushing something off a table. Alton felt the cold get into his collar. He kept his voice level. I pay taxes on this building, officer. More than you'd think. Oh, he's funny. Sloane keyed his radio for the first time, and what he called in was not a plate check. Dispatch, I need a tow at the Capitol East lot, abandoned or unauthorized vehicle, and I've got one male trespasser, being uncooperative. I haven't refused you anything, Alton said quietly. You're still talking. That's refusing. Sloane pointed at the truck. Hands on the hood. Alton looked at him for a long second. Sleet ticked on the truck roof between them. Then he turned, put both palms flat on the cold, wet metal of the hood his father had waxed every spring for 3 decades, and stood still while a man 20 years his junior kicked his boots apart and patted him down in an empty parking lot in front of the building where his own portrait hung in the second-floor gallery. Sloane pulled the wallet out himself. He didn't open it. He tossed it on the hood, and it slid and stopped against the wiper blade. Then the cuffs came out, and they were exactly as cold as the morning, and they ratcheted down on the wrists of a 56-year-old man carrying a Bible and a coffee can of drill bits. For one moment, Sloane paused. He'd leaned into the cab to check it, and he saw the funeral program on the dash, the old man in the deacon's suit, the date 3 weeks past. He saw the bag of peppermints in the door. Something crossed his face, quick like a bird's shadow over a field. His own father had died in October. He'd carried the program around in his cruiser for a month, unable to throw it out and unable to look at it. His hand hovered near the dash for a second. Then he straightened up, and the shadow was gone. Truck's getting towed, he said. You can cry about it at the impound. The tow truck came grinding into the lot at 8:05, a big diesel flatbed with Price & Sons towing on the door in flaking gold letters. The driver climbed down. He was a heavy-set white man around 60 in an orange knit cap, and his name was Wendell Price, and he took exactly 4 steps toward the F-150 before he stopped like he'd walked into glass. He looked at the handcuffed man standing in the sleet by the cruiser. He looked at Sloane. He looked back at the handcuffed man. Hook it up, Sloane said. I got things to do. Wendell didn't move. 3 years earlier, in the flood, when the river took out the 4th Street Bridge and half the east side went under brown water, Wendell Price had spent 9 hours winching cars off flooded streets next to a man in waders and a state windbreaker who never once left for the cameras, who handed Wendell coffee out of his own thermos at 2 in the morning. Wendell had shaken that man's hand. Wendell had a photograph of it on the wall of his shop, next to the fire extinguisher permit. Son, Wendell said slowly, do you know who that is? It's a trespasser is who it is. Hook the truck. That's Alton Reese. Wendell's voice cracked upward. That is the governor of the state. You have got the governor of this state in handcuffs, and you want me to tow the governor's dead daddy's truck off the governor's own parking spot at the governor's own capital. And I am telling you right now, I would sooner hook up your cruiser. The parking lot got very quiet. Even the sleet seemed to hold up for a second. Sloane laughed. It came out wrong, thin at the edges. This isn't the governor. Governor drives a black Suburban, motorcade, the whole thing. I've seen it. This guy's wearing a busted Carhartt. It's Saturday, you idiot, Wendell said. And that was when Sloane finally did the thing he should have done 25 minutes earlier. He picked the wallet up off the hood, and he opened it. The narration of a man's life can slow down at certain moments, and this was one of them. Behind a driver's license, worn soft at the corners, sat a state identification card with a gold seal. And under the photograph, in small block letters, it read, Reese Alton J. And under that, in smaller letters that Sloane would see on the inside of his eyelids for the rest of his life, It read Office of the Governor, and under that, Executive. The wallet did not shake in Sloane's hand. His hand shook around the wallet. He looked up. The man in the handcuffs was watching him with an expression that wasn't anger, which was the terrible part. It was patience. It was the face of a man who had been waiting to see how far this would go, and now knew. "You," Sloane started. "You didn't. You never said. You never asked my name," the governor said. "Not once. You want to think about that. You searched me, cuffed me, and called a tow on me, and you never asked my name, because you'd already decided what it was." Down the block, an engine turned over. Then another. Here is what Officer Derek Sloane did not know. The governor's phone, sitting in the truck's cup holder, carried an executive protection tracker, and when it sat motionless in an exterior lot for 20 minutes past his normal pattern on a Saturday, the state police watch commander pulled up the Capitol's east camera feed on a wall monitor. He watched, live, in high definition, a Capital District officer put the governor of the state against the hood of a truck and cuff him. The watch commander said 2 words that cannot be repeated here, and then he said 5 that could. "All units, Capital, right now." They came in under 4 minutes. 2 black Suburbans first, hopping the curb at the plaza's edge. Then 3 state police cruisers with light bars running silent, fanning across the mouth of the lot like a closing hand. Troopers came out of the vehicles before they'd fully stopped, grey campaign hats darkening in the sleet. And they moved on that little scene by the tow truck with a speed that made Wendell Price step backward into his own bumper. The first one to reach them was Captain Elena Ruiz, head of the Executive Protection Unit, and she did not draw a weapon, and she did not raise her voice. And both of those facts were somehow more frightening than the alternative. "Take those cuffs off the governor," she said. "Now." Sloane's fingers had gone stupid with cold and adrenaline, and he dropped the key once, in the slush, and had to kneel down in front of everyone and feel for it, and every trooper in that lot stood absolutely silent and watched him do it. The cuffs came off. The governor rolled his wrists slowly, one and then the other, red rings pressed into the skin. "Sir, are you injured?" Ruiz asked. "I'm cold," the governor said, "and my father's truck is not going anywhere." "No, sir, it is not." Sloane found his voice, and this was his second great mistake of the morning, because he used it. "Captain, with respect, he was in a restricted lot, no visible authorization. He matched, he was the profile of. We've had reports of vehicle break-ins, and he was uncooperative, and I followed procedure. And honestly, if he had just identified himself, none of this, or—" "Stop talking," Ruiz said, without looking at him. "I want it on record that I—" "Officer." She turned then, and looked at him fully. "Every word you have said this morning is already on record. That is your problem." The chain of command broke over Derek Sloane like a wave over a sandcastle, and it took less than an hour. The chief of the Capital District Police, a heavy-set man named Corrigan, arrived at 8:51, still wearing a windbreaker over a pajama shirt, having driven from his granddaughter's swim meet at speeds he would have ticketed anyone else for. He watched 40 seconds of the camera footage on a trooper's tablet, closed his eyes, and stood in the sleet with his hand over his mouth. Then procedure happened, and procedure is a cold machine, and it ran exactly the way it had run on the governor an hour before, except in reverse. "Officer Sloane, weapon and badge on the hood." "Chief, if you'll just let me." On the hood, Sloane unholstered his sidearm and set it on the hood of the tow truck, because that was the vehicle nearest, and then his badge, and the gold of it looked very small sitting on wet, diesel-splattered steel. He was made to stand to the side while a trooper photographed his equipment. He was read the notice of emergency suspension aloud in the parking lot in front of 9 troopers, a tow operator, and the man he'd arrested, When he tried once more to explain, the chief said the sentence that would follow Sloane through every version of this story, told afterward. "Derek, he asked you to check. You had the answer in your hand the whole time, and you wouldn't look, because looking might have cost you the arrest." They put Sloane in the back of a cruiser. Not cuffed, just seated, behind the cage, where the doors don't open from the inside. And he sat there with sleet melting on the window, watching the governor of the state stand by that old blue truck, talking quietly with a tow driver. The two of them laughing once, briefly, about something no one else heard. The investigation took 11 weeks, and the numbers came out of it like teeth. Internal Affairs pulled every stop, tow, and trespass citation Derek Sloane had written in 11 years around the Capital District. There were 940 of them. Auditors flagged 312 as lacking legal basis. Of those, 81% involved Black or Latino drivers, in a county that is 34% Black and Latino. 43 citizen complaints had been filed against Sloane over his career. 6 had been quietly settled by the city's insurance carrier, sealed, totaling $290,000, without a single day of suspension. The 44th complainant turned out to be the one man in the state who could not be made to go away. The class action was filed in April. 217 plaintiffs, people whose cars had been towed off their own streets, out of church lots, from outside the food bank on Delaney Avenue, where Sloane had run what he called quality of life sweeps. The city settled for $4.6 million. The governor was offered his own settlement and declined every cent of it, then testified for the plaintiffs anyway, in a courtroom on a Tuesday, wearing the same brown jacket. Sloane was terminated in May, indicted for official oppression and unlawful restraint in June, and pleaded guilty in September. 2 years probation, permanent decertification, entered into the new statewide registry, so that no department in the state could ever quietly rehire him, the way 2 departments had quietly hired him before. The registry was created by a law the legislature passed that same summer, along with mandatory body cameras for all capital and municipal police and an independent civilian board that now reviews every police-ordered tow in the state. The bill had a formal number, but everybody in the State House called it the Parking Lot Bill. At the signing, reporters asked the governor to talk about what it felt like, the cuffs, the sleet, all of it. He looked at the microphones for a moment. "He never asked my name," the governor said. "That was the whole thing, right there. He didn't arrest a governor that morning. He thought he was arresting nobody. So understand me. This law isn't for governors. Governors are fine. This law is for everybody he thought was nobody." Then he put down the pen and shook the hand of the man standing beside him at the signing table, a heavy-set tow operator in a clean orange cap, whom he had invited personally, and whose company now held the state contract it had been passed over for 3 times. On a warm Saturday the following spring, a faded blue 1989 F-150 pulled into the east lot of the Capitol at 7:40 in the morning. The new parking attendant, a college kid with headphones around his neck, raised the gate and lifted 2 fingers off the booth's counter in a lazy salute. The truck rolled into the same reserved space, and the engine ticked as it cooled. The man inside didn't get out right away. He unwrapped a peppermint from the bag in the door pocket, put it in his cheek, and took the funeral program down off the dashboard, where it had ridden for over a year. Faded now, the deacon's suit gone pale grey in the photograph. He looked at it a while. Then he reached up and tucked it carefully under the sun visor, where it would ride from now on, out of the light. He dropped the tailgate, sat on it with a thermos of coffee, and watched the sun come up over the dome, and nobody in the whole world asked him what he thought he was doing there.